This is the economy block, and you can find this on the Quilt Notes website by clicking on blocks, and this will show up and you can click on the icon to come to this page. I'm going to show you how to piece this block 3 different ways: by rotary cutting, using QUILT, and paper piecing. Here's what the block looks like. And some people call this a square in a square because if you look, there's a center square and there's a square on point, and then there's the last square around the edge. This block can be used in a lot of different ways. You can use it just as a block itself, or you can use it as a center for another block like we see down here. I have a link to my economy block board on Pinterest, so you'll get to look at all these different varieties of quilts made with this block. I believe this one right here, if you click on this one, you'll be able to download a free pattern from Robert Kaufman website. So just take a look at that and it'll give you some ideas and inspiration. Here are some blocks from the block of the day, and you'll see the economy block is in the center here, and this is around the edges. I do have a calculator on this, and the link will take you there. This is called the Whirlpool block. It was done on July 13th, block of the day, and this will link to that block. So here is the economy block, and in the center, instead of a square, we put a 4-patch block there. And then here's another one. This was done in January 28th, called Charms. Here is the economy block in the center, and then we have triangles in the corners. And you can click on that to go to that video as well. So here's how the block is constructed. I've got a center square, and then I call this the inside triangle and this the outside triangle. Here is the center square. It's 1 patch, that's a square. The inside triangles are made by cutting a square and then cutting it in half on the diagonal twice. This is actually a 1/4 square triangle patch. So these are 4 patches, 4 1/4 square triangle patches. For the outside triangles, we cut 2 squares and then we cut them in half once on the diagonal, and these are 2 half square triangle patches. We'll need a total of 4. And you might ask, why don't we just cut 4 more like we did here? That's because these half square triangles go on the outside. So we want the lengthwise and crosswise grains to be going along the outside. If we used the 1/4 square triangle, these edges here would be along the outside, and those are bias edges. So it makes the quilt a little bit difficult to piece. You might have some wavy blocks if you do that. Often I will check my math using the Electric Quilt 8, the quilt design software. And if you're interested, you can click on this link to take you to more information. But as I was checking all the various sizes for the calculators, I noticed a certain pattern going on. And I'm not going to read it all, but I'll just tell you. If we look at this and say this is a 6-inch finished square, if we take half of that, which is 3 inches, that's the finished size of this center square. And so we'll have to add, you take 3 inches and you'll add 1/2 inch and you'll cut it 3.5 inch squares. And you also use the same size, the 3-inch finished 1/4 square triangles. And for 1/4 square triangles, you add 1.25, 1.25 inches. So this would be cut 4.25 inches. And for the last one, the half square triangles that go on the outside, you would need to cut 3 7/8 inch squares, or you can round it up to 4 inches if you like, and you'll need 2 of those for the outside edges. So I will have this video will be included here once it's finished. We're going to rotary cutting now, and for the rotary cutting, I'm going to recommend you use a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance, especially when you do your test block, to make sure this will come out right. And I've added a little bit extra in your cutting to trim it off if you need to. I've got my calculators looking different now, and I'll show you why I did that. So if we click fabric requirements down here, and it will open up the calculator in a pop-up window. So let's open that, and here it pops up. So this is the economy block for rotary cutting. We'll put in here the number of blocks we need, let's say 12. And the finished size, you can do any size you want. Let's just say 4-inch finished. And here are your results. You can change these numbers by clicking the arrows up or down, and you'll see that the values change down here at the bottom. And why I'm doing this is, for one thing, it looks nicer, and you can right click with your mouse and press the print button, and a window will show up to print. Here we're printing an Adobe PDF, and let's see, I can't move this down, but if I scroll down here, for some reason my browser makes 8 copies of these, so you don't need 8 copies. But the first one, which is out of sight here, it gives the information. You put the number needed and the block size here. That will come in this first one that's up here you can't see because I can't move it down. So anyway, what you want to do is go down to here where it says pages, and you want to just print 1 page. You don't need 8 copies of the same thing. And then you can print this. Then to close this out, you'll just press the X button. So it looks better here, and it's easier to make a copy of it for your references. And we have the same thing with the QUILT cutting. For QUILT, you're going to use the cubes, and you'll use shapes 1, 3, and 4 from whatever size cube you're using. 1 is always the center square, 3 is always the half square triangle, and 4 is always the quarter square triangle. So that has it here. And here are the fabric requirements. So here's another pop-up window. And let's say we want 12 of these. And for this, I just did the amounts for the 6-inch, 8-inch, 10-inch, and 12-inch. And those finished sizes correspond to that size of the cube. So you click on the cube you're using. So in this case, it would be an 8-inch finished block using the 8-inch cube. And it gives you the fabric you need for the center square, which is die 1, the inside triangles, which is die 4, and the outside triangles, which are die 3. And again, you can right click on this and print them. I'll close this down. Paper piecing. There's a link here where you can download the paper piecing foundations from 2 inches up to 6 inches, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 inches finished. You download those. And to find the fabric requirements for your paper piecing, you'll go up to the rotary cutting calculator here. And let's see, we need to zero this out. So let's zero that out. Let's say you wanted a 4-inch finished foundation paper pieced. So what you'll do is put the number you need here, let's say 13, and the finished size we're going to say is 5 inches. Because we want the 4-inch, but we want to cut the pieces a little bit larger for paper piecing. So for a 4-inch finished, you would choose 5 finished size here. For a 6-inch finished, you would choose 7, and that's what I'm doing in the demo today. And again, you can right click on this and print it out for your records. So now we'll go to show you how to piece all 3 of these methods: the rotary cut method, the QUILT method, and the paper piecing. For step 2, we take the 4-patch unit, stitch the D patches to all 4 sides, but we start with opposite sides first. I like to flip the triangle over with the right side up and then place the other piece on top of it, and I'm lining up this edge. Then I'm looking at these little triangles that are sticking out to make sure that they are the same size, and I'll stitch 1/4 inch. Do the same thing to the other side, this opposite side here. Then press your seams open, and we'll do the remaining sides next. Trim these nubs off even with this edge. And do the same thing over here. Next, we'll attach the other 2 sides, and do this the same way. Put the triangle down right side up and then center this on the edge. Line up the edge and center these little triangles. Do that for both sides and press the seams open. And we'll trim these nubs on all the sides. Next we'll take our C patches, which are these, and we have to watch the placement of these. You'll see the C patches are two different fabrics. Here's the dark fabric, so we need to place a light fabric right across from it, and the same thing here. Do this the same way. Flip this over, center it. You see your little two little triangles, and then stitch across there. Then do the bottom part too. Press your seams open, and then repeat that with the dark fabrics. Here are the two sides. In order to make these points nice and sharp, you'll want to stitch with this piece of fabric on top so you can see where the point is. And so let's cut off these nubs. Put this down, flip this over, and center it again. And what you'll want to do is, when you're stitching your 1/4 of an inch, you'll want to stitch right above this point. You don't want the point to be cut off, so stitch above the point and keep going. Here's a close-up of the stitching. I missed the point, so it comes out really nice on this side. Next we have our QUILT cut pieces. This is the center square, this is the 1/4 square triangle, or 4 pieces, and this is our 4 pieces of the larger 1/2 square triangle. You're going to take this 1/4 square triangle, and you'll see the edges are straight on both sides. So we'll just match up the top and the 2 sides. And if they don't fit exactly, don't stretch anything to make it fit. Just center it where you are. And now you're going to stitch a true 1/4 of an inch. So do that side, then flip this around and match the other side. Then I'm going to press these seams either open or to one side. And here's our piece. It's pressed. We'll take the next one, and you'll see these little squared off corners here should match with these corners. Just put them up there. And again, if they don't match perfectly, just center it and stitch 1/4 inch, and do the same thing on this side. You'll have these little nubs on the 4 edges, so just cut those off. Now we'll take our 1/2 square triangle, stitch it like this, flip it over, and this you have to center. It's not going to match up any straight edges except for the top, but you'll see there's a little bitty triangle poking out here and here, so just make sure those triangles are the same size. Then stitch 1/4 inch. Do the same thing on this side and press. Then finally we'll add it to these 2 sides that are left and press your seams. When you stitch this top piece, the 3rd and 4th pieces, the edge here, this edge is cut on an angle like this. They will match up with the angle here on both sides. Then you press your seams open. Here's what you'll have when it's finished. Here's the foundation for the 6-inch finished block, and the instructions up here will tell you, since this is a 6-inch finished block, go to the calculator and put in a block size of 7. That will get you the square sizes that you need to cut for your paper piecing of this block. Now what I do is I cut about a 1/4 inch away from the outside line, just to give some extra, because the outside line is your final cutting line, and I don't like to piece with all this extra paper, so that's just one of my pet peeves. Oh, and it does tell you that the outer square should measure 6.5, so be sure to measure that. When you print these, print on actual size setting on your printer. Now let's look at this. We're going to start in the center, and here's my center square. For the center, I always start by gluing the first piece with my glue stick. This is a fabric glue stick, and I just put a little bit, whoops, that came off. I just put a little bit on underneath the square and sort of center it with the right side up, and then flip it over and kind of look at it through the lighting. You can't see it, to make sure the square covers all of this square. Now that's number one. So now we're going to go to the triangle center. I'm calling this center triangle, but I'll need to change that. This is the inside triangle, and we're going to use the quarter square triangle patches. So I use just a smaller ruler, and the line between 1 and 2, space 1 and space 2, I put the ruler on that line and then fold it up against the ruler and then fold it back. Then I use the ruler and cut off, trim a 1/4 inch. So I place the 1/4 inch mark on the fold of the paper. Next, if you can see through the paper this triangle. So that's going to help you with your placement. But your square is right here, and you can use that as your placement as well. So we'll put the right side up here, and we'll place this on top, and you're lining up these edges at the top, and you can see your lines through the paper, and you can see where your line is going with your fabric, so you know you have enough. What you'll do now is, some people like to take this and put a little glue, in the seam allowance and glue that down. It just helps it when you bring it to the sewing machine, it won't come apart. Now I'm going to flip this over at the sewing machine. I start stitching a little bit off of the line, stitch on the line, then stitch a little bit off of the line. And you'll want to lower your stitch length so you have more stitches per inch. Now I have zoomed way in so you can see that I started the stitching off the line, stitched on the line, and then went a few stitches off. You'll do that for all of your stitching. Now we'll turn this over and flip this up and press it. Then for each of these other sides, you're just going to go in order. We did 1 to 2, now we'll do 1 to 3, then do 4 and 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. It's always opposites. You do it exactly the same way we did this one, pressing after each time. You're going to get to a point where you have fabric stitched on both sides. We're going to stitch this one right now. And what you do, you place your ruler on the line, and you have stitched off of this line, so the fabric wants to come up with it. Crease the edges of the paper with your fingers and then fold it over, and the fabric will come with it right now. Then just pull it off, and you're tearing the paper but making the fabric lie flat. Now you can take your 1/4 inch and trim. And you're ready to stitch your next piece, like this. When all of your stitching and pressing is done, it's time to trim the papers and then remove the papers. This dark line is the stitching line. This line, a 1/4 inch away, is your cut line. And what I like to do is put the 1/4 inch mark of my ruler, this dashed line on this ruler. I like to put that on this on the stitching line, the dark line. To me, it's easier to line that up than it is to try to line up the edge of this ruler with this thinner line on the edge. And I know I'm getting a 1/4 inch when I'm lining up this dashed line, the 1/4 inch line, on this stitching line. Then you will just trim paper and fabric. And do that to all 4 sides. Now to remove the paper, I always put my thumb on the seam line and then tear the paper towards the seam line. And then just go around and round, moving the papers like this. You'll have to pop these up and take these. If you pull them apart like this. And there's your paper pieced. So now we have paper pieced, QUILT pieced, and rotary cut pieced. They all finish at 6 inches. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and while you're at it, click the bell to be notified of future videos.